Hello there, it's Michael, and I'm going through stage two of the video because we didn't quite get through. We got up to category nine, and I wanted to make sure that I finished right on 12 o'clock. I'm very mindful of the time that I ask for people to invest into the webinar. So I wanted to also make sure that I'm giving you as much information as I possibly can. And we had a little bit of a Q&A. We spent the last 30 or so minutes with a few people and just gone through and spent some time with them on a one-on-one basis. So category nine, have the general conditions, special conditions, and extra special conditions used in the rental agreement been rewritten to ensure they comply with the Act, regulations, and guidelines, and have these conditions been approved and signed off by the directors or the officer in effective control? There'll be two separate types of conditions. The first one will be special conditions that is just for every property. So rent to transfer fees, break lease fees, the amount that the renter was charged for letting fees that needs to be put into the break lease formula. Any restrictions on e-bikes, in rent increases, smoke alarm testing and manuals, etc. And then, do you have that? So are you putting the break lease fees in now into your rental agreement? If you're not, then I would suggest you do. And the way that I do it is we have a zero amount on the lease template. And if an owner was charged $200, if an owner was charged 2.2 weeks and they were $400 a week rent, then $880 would be put into the rental agreement as the letting fee. If that's charged $350 for the internet, that would be put in. And so we're actually putting the dollar figure into each of the leases. Special conditions which are specific to the property. And this is not generic. These ones which are either embedded networks, OC rules, car stackers, pets, furnished, farming, fireplaces, water tanks, steam cleaning, any items that don't meet the minimum standards. All those things need to be put into the as a special set of conditions. Do you have that now? Do you have that broken up? And if not, then if it's just one generic lease, then I would suggest that you have to look at trying to create that. Also, do you have a separate rental agreement versus a lease renewal? I don't know how many places I go to that have a one lease and it's used for all properties. The problem with that is that inside the lease, it'll start talking about the condition report being given to you, obligations for notices and those sorts of things. But a lease renewal is very different. It'll also talk about your break lease fees, where there's no break lease in the second year. It changes. So anyway, so it needs to be two different ones. Do you have a series of written questions or a script that the leasing team can use when processing a new rental application? If you don't, my suggestion was either create it as a workflow, create it as a series of tick and flick. The reasons why that's important is because you want to have a series of questions that they can ask, but more importantly, you also want to have a series of questions what you cannot ask. My suggestion is that you must document what you can't ask. So you can't ask around race, religion, sexual orientation, all of those things that are on the Form 3. Disability, kids, you can't ask those sorts of things. You can't ask about previous bond. You can't ask if the person's ever been taken to VCAT. You can't ask those. So don't just assume that the person who's completing the application form knows what they can't ask. Write it out. Put it into a list. So these are the things you can ask. These are the things you can't. And again, this becomes part of your standard operations. If you can build the standard operations, if you can build a list like this, you're going to go a long way in preventing the chance that, or not opportunity, but the chance where you'll end up in front of CAV or VCAT and those sorts of things. Do you have a procedure? Is there a set document, checklist, detailed procedure that's followed every time, including the reference checks, employment checks, previous rental checks, and tenancy database checks? Why am I asking this? Whenever I'm doing audits, whether it's through a due diligence or I'm just working for an office and I'm doing a health check, I'll go in and I cannot find ever can I find the reference check notes that the agent took when they were ringing up and speaking to the employer, their personal references, their previous agent might be a reference check there. Never find them. They're never sitting in the Google Drive. They're never sitting in the property folder ever. And so as a result, if you were to go back in a year's time or 2 years' time and go to VCAT and say, this person's absconded, they've left the property, who are we following them up? Where was their ID? It's all gone. Like I don't know where it goes. I don't know where. So there needs to be there needs to be reference checks, notes, and where does that sit? Scan it, put it onto the into the application file. And then the next one is making sure that, oh, here we go. Do you have a procedure in the office that requires the citing and copying of original photo ID at the time of handing over the keys to a renter? I don't know how many times and through the REIV, I've been emceed workshops or webinars where we've had the police talking to us around risk management and drug syndicates that are coming in and taking over properties for drug grow houses. And one of the things that they say often is that the person who came to the property on the weekend and viewed the property is very rarely the person who's actually renting it. So they have people that are fake families that will go out and do the applications. But then the person who's renting it is, or sometimes is going to be the drug group or the gang. So you need to get photo ID, proper photo ID, not just what's sitting inside of the application form. And a classic one, which is a real issue, and the police, when I was doing an REIV webinar, the police were talking about, they showed an example of a particular application form. And it was really interesting because the application form had the passport and the driver's license, and the photograph was identical. And so what it did was an experienced agent would pick that up and say, oh, hang on, the photograph license and the passport license, you can't have the same, they don't use the same photos. But a newer or a junior or an outsourced or a VA probably wouldn't pick that up. And so this is why it's important that we go through and we start to have these procedures. Hope that makes sense. Are you comfortable that there's evidence that a valid and enforceable signed a rental provider disclosure statement, not more than 90 days old, was provided to every applicant prior to them signing a rental agreement to sign? The disclosure statement, which has been completed and signed by the registered owner, is required for both new tenancy and lease renewals. Again, the number of times I go to properties and I don't see them on the lease renewals. There was an office not that long ago that I was speaking to, and they went out and got Inspection Express owner's instruction forms back in 2021, which has the disclosure in it, and then they just kept using the same one from 2021. They had the disclosure once, and they thought that it was a one size fits all rather than had to be updated. The reason I suggest that it needs to be not more than 90 days old is that that's the time frame. If an owner says no to selling and then they elect to sell shortly after the renters moved in, that's the time frame that you've got. You can't do anything for the first 90 days. So that's why I say 90 days is roughly how long they last. But there's nothing in the legislation that says how long a disclosure will last. Are you comfortable that the method for disclosing the renter transfer fee, the assignment fee, and the break lease fees are being disclosed in the rental agreement correctly? So the rental transfer fee, let's just call it $220 or $100, $110, $220, $330, whatever it is that you're charging, must be in the agency agreement, in the authority. The owner must be being charged, and then you put that whatever fee they're being charged into the rental agreement. You can't put it just as a fee to the renter. And the same as break lease fees. Whatever the owner was charged, that's what you can ask to be reimbursed. Pro rata, of course. Are you comfortable that the fees from the exclusive leasing and managing agency authority have been correctly entered into the owner card for each property and that the fees are current? Give you a great example. I use a 1.1% of the average annual management, of the average annual contract term. So if it's 12 months or 18 months, whatever the lease was, let's call it a $20,000 rental for the year. 1.1%, $220, just to simplify the math. And so what happens is when I go into properties, I go into the owner card and I see 1.1% added into there. Now, if it's a weekly or a monthly rent, that 1.1% in the owner card is pulling it from that amount, not the annual amount. So it's things like that. Are you comfortable that you've done a fee audit inside the way the data's been set up? the number of times I was working with an office just recently, and we had all sorts of different variations on internet because some were old, some were new. So when was the last time you did a fee audit? So number 70, are you comfortable that the fees from the exclusive leasing authority have been entered incorrectly? Are you 100% satisfied that every property under management generates enough management fee income to meet the minimum agency benchmark? Firstly, have you got a benchmark? Have you set an AMI that covers the expenses and allows for at least 20% profit? So, what do I mean by that? So, what I mean by that is if you are managing a property and it's at $100 per month plus GST, your AMI is $1,200. Now, that $1,200 would mean that you've got $1,000 of expenses and the $200 is profit. So it's very, very easy to eat into that profit. So what you want to make sure is that you've got your full expenses and that you've then buffered that with at least a 20% profit on top. So that if you, because it's the profit that, that gets eaten away first, and too many offices that I see are running properties where they're not profitable. Are you 100% satisfied that every property under management is profitable? If you say yes to that one there, I'd be very, very surprised because unless you've done your above the line, below the line benchmarking and you know which ones are and aren't profitable, until you know what the actual benchmark should be, it's very difficult to understand that. But it's important because what you want to make sure is not so much what you're doing currently, what management are you going to bring on moving forward? So not all business is good business. It should only ever be profitable business. But in order for it to be profitable, you need to first understand what's the benchmark? What does it cost? What's the profit amount? Do you need to update the fees and agency authorities for any properties within the portfolio? I would imagine that would be a yes for most people. Are you comfortable that the process of properly disclosing when a property has been professionally cleaned is being managed correctly? Is the cleaning receipt being given to the new renters? Are the cleaning receipts detailed and broken up to outline exactly what cleaning has taken place in the property instead of just saying bond clean? I was at a workshop just recently, and one of the members from VCAT was delivering the workshop, and he suggested things like you should have the number of hours and the number of people that were actually involved in the cleaning. So let's just say it was two people that were there for 4 hours each, and it was $88 an hour. So you multiply the two people by $88 twice, and then break down what they cleaned. Clean bedroom one, clean bedroom two, clean kitchen, clean bathroom, clean balcony, clean storage unit, clean garage, clean whatever it is that they did, you need to break that down rather than just saying, which is what I see, bond clean. And so the reasons why that's important, so go back to your cleaner, ask them to be more detailed. The reason that's important is because when VCAT, and you're at VCAT and you're trying to justify cleaning, they want to look and compare apples to apples. So at the start of the tenancy, at the end of the tenancy, if there was a full list and it was 10 hours worth of cleaning, and we're back here at the end of the lease and it's full list and 10 hours of cleaning, apples to apples. But if the cleaning is 10 hours here and there was only a 2 hour clean here, that's unfair. And so what VCAT want to be able to do is they want to be able to compare the two lots of cleaning. Makes sense? Is the cleaning special condition recorded in the ingoing condition report? So often I don't see that. Is there, so you need to be putting it into there, need to give a copy of the receipt to them, maybe take a photograph of the receipt, make a note that the property was clean, that the renter needs to bring the same standard. You can't improve it to the same standard. Is there a detailed audit workflow or procedure in place to ensure that every new tenancy is set up correctly? Is there a detailed checklist of the procedure timeline stating which documents are required to be stored in property trust software against the renter profile? This next one is really, really important. Are you 100% satisfied that there are no renter documents being saved incorrectly in the owner profile within the trust software? The issue with this one is that as an agency, you have an obligation to retain the information from a renter for a period of at least 7 years. Now, 3 years for their private ID is coming in, but at least 7 years for the transaction. The problem is because it's a financial transaction, or 5 years at least, but 7 years for the financial details. And the problem is that so often I see ingoing condition reports and leases all being added into the software, but added into against the owner. And then when you archive a tenant, those things are not there. So they've got to be pulled out, added to the tenant, maybe stored into a Google Drive, and only the owner documents should be saved there. So that's 19 points for category 9. I've put this inside of here because often when we're talking about renters, I think it's really important. If you go back through your lease, inside of the leases that I have all of the links back through to the Act. These sort of places here. If you don't have education, or you're not providing videos or resources or fact sheets, then what you do is you end up with a renter jumping onto like a Facebook group, or a Purple Pinges, or a tenant the tenants union website, and then they come up with all sorts of information. So what I would suggest is that you try where possible to provide the renter the right rules, the same rules that you're working from. And so then there's open communication rather than getting information from just anywhere. Category 9. Category 10, property listings. This is the one that's coming into play on the 25th of November. Really, really important for agencies to have a good, robust system around this one. And even today, so what are we today? Thursday, the 20th of November, I would be making a suggestion that you do an audit of every property that's online today, to check and make sure that it meets rental minimum standards for this coming weekend. I would also then make sure that any of the notice to vacates that are forthcoming, that you do those as well. And any leases that are coming up that you think will be coming up over the next couple of weeks into Christmas, that you think would be re-advertised, then I'd be making sure that they meet the minimum standards as well. Otherwise, you cannot put the property online. Okay, category 10, property listings, marketing, agency website, investor resources. Does the agency have a workflow, a checklist, and a protocol for minimum agency advertising standards for all internet listings? It's really important that you've got some form of framework. And so inside of Property Me, I've built a whole series of workflows and checklists, and I have one specifically for advertising an existing property. And one of those points in there is cannot be listed until it meets the minimum standards. And so that's now what we're doing is, if the property manager or the VA or whoever is loading the ad, they've got to work through that before we load it online. And it's not load it and then go to the workflow. It's use the workflow before loading it. And so they'll get stuck at that point, or they've got to justify their reasonable belief that the property met the minimum standards. Otherwise, they can't list it online. So you need to be able to have some sort of framework. And if you can demonstrate as an office that you've got some framework, then if you were ever investigated by CAV, you can then turn around and say, well, hang on, here's our checklist that we've built. Now, if you need help with the checklist, by all means, reach out to me. I've got them. I've done them for a couple of webinars, and I could certainly help build them into your specific to your office. Has there been a person or a property manager or a VA allocated to actively work through every property in the portfolio to prepare and audit each set of photographs, internet text, OC rules, and where applicable, start to collate the attributes of the property that should be disclosed when the property comes up for lease next? So I was really pleasantly surprised when I was speaking to a group of property managers last week at a conference, and I spoke about the theory, and I've been saying that it would be good if we as an industry were able to feel confident enough to be able to put into our internet ads, this property complies with the rental minimum standards. This property complies with the smoke, gas, and electric compliance inspections. And if we're doing that, then what's happening is we're lifting the bar. And then when you're going out and listing a new property, you just say to the owner, this is the way we advertise properties. We do not put them online until they meet this standard. And so I was in a room full of agents. There was about 40 or so agents. And one particular department head said, we do that. And so he showed us the ad, and he actually writes it in there. And I said to him, where did you get that? Because I've been saying that for years. He said, I don't know, I went to a webinar or a seminar or something. I don't know where it was, but I thought it was a great idea, and picked it up. I've been saying this for years. If we all started to lift the game and lift the standards of our advertising, then what would happen is They only use professional photographs. They have the internet copy written correctly. And they start to write in there, where it's applicable for OC rules, you write that in there as well. If there's a move in, move out policy, write that. Have you implemented version control inside your office for all advertising documents to ensure that you keep track on what has been reviewed and acceptable and what's not? Version control should be used to update each internet listing. For example, I would be going through and I'd be writing now, if you've got 10 properties online, I'd take the internet text off the internet, put it into a Word doc. Someone needs to sign it off. So I'd have a little signature down below and it'd be like signed off by department head on this date. And the version could be V1 November 2025. So in 12 months' time, when we're coming up and we need to release this property, we can look back and say, well, the last time this was verified was in November of 2025. As opposed to what we tend to do is just go and pull the last ad up and then pop it back on again. This is how we end up getting ourselves into trouble. For the currently advertised properties and each time you receive a notice to vacate, need to collate the professional cleaning and steam cleaning receipts to provide them with the condition report. Contact the renter for the invoices, store them in the system. And when I was going back through this later on, I was reading the checklist. I probably need to rework that. I'll leave that with you as to how you fill that in, yes, no's. I'm probably going to remove that or rework that particular section. Do you have a call to action on the agency website that's placed prominently at the top of the site, used to generate new property management inquiries? The call to action would be used to obtain new inquiry, name, phone number, email, and potentially their property address in exchange for a piece of information, like an investor guide or an ebook or a video, a rental appraisal. And so, as an idea, there's no reasons why you couldn't spend 4 or 5 minutes doing a little Loom video or even a Zoom video today on what the 15 rental minimum standards are and the restrictions from owners to before you can place an ad online. Put that onto your website, put that next to contact us, and then you'll pick up some inquiries. You could also use that out to your existing owners as well. So try where possible to repurpose information. Try to repurpose your videos. You might have a little tick and flick checklist, like a rental checklist. The 15 rental minimum standards. Is your property compliant? Tick here, download the guide, and get a new business, new lead. And so the reasons why I'm saying that is because very few offices have that information. What we tend to do is always talk to owners in reverse. So when there's a problem, we're talking to the owners rather than saying, here's the solution, and then trying to generate inquiries that way. Have you created an investor resource section on your website? This area could be a way to attract new rental and investor inquiry. It could be an area on the website to store educational videos on topics relative to your investors. For example, depreciation calculators or videos on your arrears policy, explanation on the importance and obligations for an owner to comply with safety compliance. So go through and put those sorts of things, record a couple of videos. There's no reasons why over the summer you can't just do exactly what I'm doing, sit at a desk. You can have it blurred out at the back, record. You don't have to have information there. You can have a screen. You can be looking at CAV websites. You can be looking at whatever you wanted to do. Do a little video, pop them onto your website, and start to generate some traction. Put them onto YouTube, put them through your socials, and start to become the educator in your area. Is there a strategy in place to actively request Google reviews and testimonials from both renters and owners? So I like to set it up as I mentioned before about having a set date on a Wednesday to pick up, gains, losses. But I like it that 3 days after the renters moved into a property, that an email goes out. VAs would drive this to follow up the condition report, to double check and make sure that the move-in was okay, and then to request a Google review. You start doing that and start getting positive Google reviews from your renters, you'll start to see your business inquiry levels drive and grow. The main reasons why that doesn't happen is because we get too busy. But we can set that as a lock and forget through the VAs. But it can also be a checklist. You can put a checklist in there, and the VA has to complete that. Then the next one is there a policy to respond to each of the Google reviews, both positive and negative, in a timely manner? The positive ones are great to respond to. The negative ones are even more important because sometimes the negative ones are not necessarily an issue with you and as the office. It might be just that there was an issue with the way the vacate was, but you want to make sure that you have a solution to the negative reviews. And sometimes you can go back and ask for a renter to remove the review if there was miscommunication or you've resolved the issue. Have the Google review numbers grown consistently in the past 3 months? If the answer is yes, brilliant. If the answer is no, then consistently is not, I've gone from 50 to 52. That's not consistent. Does the homepage of your website highlight you and your agency as a go-to agency? Is there a prominent section and easy to follow instructions on how to transfer their management to your agency? Do you have a specific landing page or specific landing pages for investors, renters, and owners with a call to action? So, do you have a page for investors? Say, for example, I'm in Williamstown, investors, Williamstown. Investors Newport, investors, do you have landing pages for those, or a page for renters with information on there, or a page for property owners preparing their business, their business, preparing their property for listing, for sale, the benefits of staging, all those sorts of things? Have you got those with call to actions on them to generate new inquiry? Have you addressed item 16 of the prescribed rental agreement, smoke alarm safety, both in the rental agreement, and is there a reference to this condition on the website? Now, if I start talking about item 16, most people won't even know what item 16 is, let alone have they addressed it. And item 16 is the owner's obligation to be able to provide information to the renter before they take possession on the smoke alarm safety maintenance. And so I've got this as a special condition in the leases. And then what I do is I have that on the website as well. Put the link from the website straight into the lease, and it can be back and forth. So 19 points. How did you go on category 10 with your internet? And here's a couple of examples now of some ads that I've pulled out over the years that you would be in a lot of bother for if you use these ads for these particular reasons. Let's just go through the first one. And we've got to be mindful of what the advertising, what we're writing in our ads. And because you have to be specific and you can't generalize. For example, tram stop on your doorstep. Well, firstly, I wouldn't want to live in a property that has a tram stop on my door. Um, Secure intercom entry. Problem with that is if they ever get broken into, they can come back and sue you as the agent because it wasn't secure because they got broken into. And I know that from actual previous examples from when I had my own agency, where we had, and this is why I pull it out, is because we had a property in Glen Huntly where the secure entry at the front foyer, sometimes tenants would put a brick at the front door just to allow the door to be left open if they were going to the shops and so forth. And a renter wanted to get out of a lease, and we said, no, you need to break lease. Took us to VCAT, and she said, I'm worried about my safety. Anyone can just walk in and out. She showed different photographs with different time stamps saying that the property had been left open with bricks, and it was like a little wedged open. And VCAT allowed her to move, and me as the agent had to actually pay for her move, the removalist cost, because we had advertised a secure entry, and it wasn't. Same as secure undercover car park. If you ever write that secure undercover car park and storage cage, and if the agent has written that, and then the car park gets broken into, or someone breaks into a car and a storage cage, they have the right to sue you as the agent because you've misrepresented a particular property. So you've got to be mindful of this. Undercover, done. Car park is okay. Storage cage is okay. What we don't want to have is this word here. So as an agent, what we can't do is verify or justify the secure part. And so we've got to be really careful about this one. Over here has everything you need. Located with one of the best pockets of Richmond, that's subjective. Quality appliances, subjective. Ample cupboard, subjective. Generously sized bedroom, subjective. And only moments from. Well, you've got to be mindful here when you start talking about only moments from. Now, if you're talking about a person who's in their 80s and walks on a frame, as opposed to a younger person. So you have to be mindful of your ads. A plethora of public transport on your doorstep, best CAFs, ample storage, private and secure. Got to be mindful of those sorts of things. Hope that's helpful. How are you going with your category 10 with your ads? So, number 11, benchmarking. Almost wrapping up now. So, property benchmarking, profitability, fee maximisation, level of service, new business, and rent roll growth. Area of my expertise is benchmarking, profitability, fee maximisation. It's what I do a lot of with the businesses that I work with. Given the additional cost to manage each property, have you identified the properties within the portfolio that are not profitable, above the line, below the line, and benchmarking? So that's one of those ones. I think we've duplicated that question, but above the line, below the line. Is there a strategy to address those below the line properties, i.e., increase the fees, adding additional ancillary fees, encouraging the owner to sell the property, selling the rent roll to another agent as a small parcel, or even handing back the file to the owner? It makes no sense if you've got a property and your benchmark is $1,200 a year in management fees, and you've got a property that's sitting there at $600. Um, if you can't get rid of it, you can't increase the fees, you can't sell it, or you might be able to sell it, hand the property back. Because otherwise, you might as well just say to the owner, what I'll do is I'll manage your property, but every year I'm going to write you a check for $600 and give it to you. Because that's effectively what you're doing is you're actually absorbing the cost of the management by managing a property which is non-profitable. Does the agency have a detailed new business strategy which every team member follows? Does the agency have an advertising and social media plan which is aligned to the realistic target for the new business management? Have you set your new business targets? And I'd love it if I was paid every time an owner said to me, a business owner said to me, I'd say, what are you looking for growth next year? They said, I just want to add another 100 managements. So fantastic. How many did you add last year? 11. Well, what are you doing this year that's different to last year? Where are they going to come from? So it's a difference between having an actual strategy, a new business growth plan, a social media plan, a conversion plan, a business development plan, as opposed to hoping. Have the team been consistently achieving the new business targets month on month over the past 12 months? It's why I asked that question. If you're wanting to grow, if you've grown 100 property managements in the last 12 months, then there's a fair chance you continue to do what you're doing, you'll be at 100 again next year. Or if you increase some of the areas that are doing really well, then you might be able to do more. And the only way you can do that is if you can actually track where your new leads are coming from. I do that in through the gains and losses reports that I create. Does the new business, and I've got 32 different key criteria that I use for gains and losses to be able to drill down, forensically drill down on where the business is churning from and where the business is growing from so that we can actually spend our money and our resources in. So if we find that Google is where we're getting most of our inquiries, or we've put together a paid Instagram ad and that's where we're getting our inquiries, then what we do, we can actually track that through our gains and losses, and then so we just spend more money on that, or we just get more Google reviews if we know that that's where our plan is. But there's no use going out there and spending money on Facebook advertising if we know that in the last 12 months we've spent $5,000 on Facebook advertising and we've had zero results. So it's about being forensic and having a strategy. Does the new business strategy factor in an agreed rent roll loss churn rate of at least 8 to 10 to 12%? And so when I'm sitting down with an agency and they've got 1,000 properties, I say, okay, well, 1st of January, we've got 1,000 properties. What do you expect to be this time next year? And this so 1st of January the following year. And often the principals or the leaders will say to me, 1,000 properties. What? And I'll say, well, your natural churn rate. What are you naturally going to lose? And in a normal market, you're probably going to lose anywhere between 8 and 12%. In a tight market like we're in at the moment, where land tax is really high, where we've got additional pressures for rental minimum standards, we've got growth rates and sales conversions happening quite okay. A lot of owners are electing to sell. So you might find that your churn rate over the next 12 months is closer to 15 to 20%. So instead of being at 1,000 properties, you start out at 1,000, you, without too much effort, and nothing to do with loss management, it's as in poor management, poor service, then what you'll find is that this time next year, you might end up somewhere between 800 to 900 properties if you've got a 15 to 20% churn rate. But if you're not tracking your churn rate, you'll never know. And so you just sit there every year in hope. And so you should be factoring these in. So does the business factor in an agreed churn rate? I'd be very surprised if anyone said yes, because in my experience of working with agents for the last 10 years as a consultant, I've never come across an agency that says, yes, I've budgeted for a churn rate. And they should. Over the part, and you can manage the churn rate, but at least you need to budget for it. And then, of course, your net growth needs to be more than your losses. Over the past 12 months, has the number of new business listings exceeded the number of losses, creating a net gain and rent roll growth? Now, I'm not talking about acquisition. I'm talking about if you're losing 15%, 150 properties, are you gaining at least 15%? So if you're gaining 15%, the benefit there is that hopefully you're losing your low fee properties and you're bringing on new business at better fees. That's the best way to build your profitability for the same expenses. In your opinion, do you believe that the full rent roll, or at least the majority of the rent roll, should undergo a fee maximisation campaign in the next 3 to 4 months? This is an area that I specialise in. Fee maximisation and improving the financial return of the portfolio. There's a skill to it. There's a series of processes that you need to follow, and it's easier to do if the customers are already happy. So, do you think the level of owner satisfaction and current customer service levels would absorb an increase in fees and increase in the range of services offered in the next 3 to 4 months? Now, if you're sitting there and if you're sitting there and you have high staff turnover, high arrears, your property's been damaged, you might have had to go to VCAT, you pitched the rent at $500 a week, but when it was last leased, it was leased at $460 and it took 6 weeks to lease, then increasing the fees is not the time. Because that's not an owner that's got overall satisfaction is high and customer service level is high. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that there's some stability in the rent roll before we go out and do a fee maximisation program. Does the agency have a structured owner referral program that rewards existing owners, rental providers from within the portfolio to actively promote and refer the agency for both sales and rentals? In most instances, that'll be a no. And what I mean by a structured, I'm not talking about if the owner gives you a referral, you give them a week's free management, no, or a month. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, is there a written, documented, structured referral program that is the program well publicized and marketed? Do you believe that all owners know about it? And do you provide the reward irrespective of the outcome, or is it only paid if you're successful? And so I'll explain this. So I was working with an office a couple of years ago in Epping, and on a regular basis, we would have Friday lunches. It'd be 10 to 12 people. We would invite some owners in, and different owners each month, and we would have a bit of a lunch, talk about what's happening in the market, talk about their properties, introduce the team and the staff, have a light lunch, went for about an hour and a half, but also talk about our referral program. And so what would happen is most of the times we would do these lunches, we'd either pick up a new management or pick up someone that was actually selling. And it was a structured program. Now, of course, that's a long way to go about it. And we then started writing out to our owners and saying, just want to let you know that this is what happens if you refer managements to us. And you will be rewarded initially, and I use gold class movie tickets, you will be rewarded with the gold class movie tickets simply for the referral. Now, if we get the management, then there's another bonus on top of that. But if we just reward the referral, you get more of them. Does the agency have a structured customer loyalty program rewarding owners on the anniversary of their managements? say the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 year, 10-year agency clients. Now, the first one is you need to be able to track that. And there's no way of tracking that unless you're using maybe a label or a tag, or you've got a spreadsheet for your first management. And then that's really important. But I'll give you an example. Many, many years ago, I was working in an office out in Sunbury, and it was a 50-year business. It had been around for 50 years. And first generation had retired, second generation's coming through and managing it. And I was doing this referral program, and I was going back through and backtracking when the first managements were. And it turned out there were two properties by the same owner that were managed for 35 years from the agency. Now, we had some staff in there that weren't 35 years old. And so I went back to the principal, which is the second generation. I said, "What's the story here with these 35-year managements?" And they said to me, "Oh, we've known them for years. They're like family friends. They're not going anywhere." I remember that. They're not going anywhere. I went, "What do you mean they're not going anywhere?" And they said, "Well, that we've been to their kids' weddings. They've been to our weddings. We've been to their funerals. We have had holidays with these people. They're like family friends. They're not going anywhere." And I said, "We've been managing their properties longer than some of our staff have been alive. What do you do for them?" And the answer is, "We manage their properties." And it was nothing. And so my point here is that if you don't reward loyalty, someone else will. Someone else will reward the loyalty as new business. And so my suggestion, if you can track your average management, say your 5-year clubbers, you might do a movie night on a Thursday night, book out a cinema, and have all your clients that are 5 years plus coming to that movie. And don't make it a sell, just make it as a thank you. Then your 10-year one, you do a lawn bowls, or maybe go to a winery and book out a lunch book out some area for a winery and have a day where it's just your clients, all your 10-year clients. Get some face painting, a couple of clowns, look after the kids, make them feel important. Reward them for their loyalty. It's hard enough. We jump over hoops and jump through hoops and to get new business, but when we get it, we really struggle to retain them or acknowledge them. Does the agency currently track how long the client's been with them? Often it's no, unless you're using labels or a spreadsheet. Can you create a report or lookup to show the average length of management across the portfolio? That's a spreadsheet. There isn't a software that can actually do that. And the answer for that for most people will be no. Do you believe that, and I'll go back to that one and I'll explain to you why that's important. When I sold my rent roll, because I tracked this, when I sold my rent roll back in 2015, I was able to demonstrate to the buyers that we had an average spread across the entire portfolio of 7.3 years. Why is that important to note? Well, because I was asking for a 3.5 multiple. And so it was a slam dunk for the buyer to look at this and say, well, the agency's got a 7.3 year average. They're looking for 3.5 multiple. There's a strong chance that I'm going to double my money or at least halve my risk of losses. The flip side to that is if I was a developer and I was bringing on managements, having a building, and my average managements were 18 months, and I was asking for 3.5 times multiple, well, the probability is there's a high risk for the buyer because it's only been 18 months. So the relationship's not there. It's not as sticky. So that's why it's really important. Hope that helps. I'm trying to explain to you as much as I can so that you've got a better understanding. If you've got this far in the video, you're doing okay. Do you believe the business has capacity to significantly scale up in the next 6 to 12 months, either through aggressive rent roll growth strategies or a new rent roll acquisition? If you've got great growth strategies, referral partners, referral program, rewarding your owners, you don't need to be then buying a rent roll because you're going to do it this way. It's better to grow them organically. But if not, you might be able to drop another 100, 200, 300 properties into your portfolio. 17 points for that one. And this is the benchmarking. I'll give you an example of the benchmarking. So here we've got 624 properties on this example. The average management fee across the whole portfolio is $1,032. So what we do is we set our benchmark at 1,200. And so then what we do is we come across these ones and we say, okay, well, this one's below, above, above. below, 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 below. You can see all the red, and you can see there's a lot more red than what there is for the green. And when you look at this, you've got a nine. Let's have a look here. We've got a $600 property down here, $627, but the one directly above it is nearly 1800. So you've got to manage three of the lower ones for the same amount of effort for the one above. And so what happens is when you start to look at your benchmarking and you can pull all the information out, you'll see that there's a lot better strategy to firstly identify the ones that are below benchmark. Then what you do is you make some, try and get them to sell or again, sell these ones off just to get rid of them. Now more than ever, you must identify your non-profitable properties and assess if you want to continue managing them. You must know your break-even value. This is what your portfolio might look like, a fixer-upper. How did you go for category 11? The next two ones are fairly short. So, category 12, Consumer Affairs Resources website, legislation, acts, regulations, and the guidelines. What are you doing for your team to try and educate them? And so, here's a thing that's really important. Has the agency downloaded all of the relevant acts, regulations, fact sheets, guides, and resources applicable to the role of a property manager and made them available to the team in an electronic library, say like a Google Drive, Trello board, exactly? If the answer is no, then put no. And I'll give you an example of how it looks. Here's a couple here. And so in the Trello boards that I build, the training boards, we've gone out and pulled, it's well over 100 PDFs. There's different acts, different regs, and then we put them into a Trello board, which the team have access to. Why is that important? Because I can just go to Google and they can go to Google. But if I'm ever contested, say, for example, VCAT comes in or a CAV and they say, your staff have gone and done X, and you can turn around and say, well, hang on, I've provided the staff all of the materials. Yes, they're online, but I've actually gone to the trouble of putting them into our training library, and that the staff, as part of their eligibility to act and their authority to act, have to adhere to our policies and procedures. These are our policies and procedures. And so you're doing the right things. So you just want to make sure that you can go in and so this is what it looks like. So I've got there's over 100 sitting inside of here. So it sits up on an office drive. And yes, it needs to be updated every now and again. And when things change, we have last update dates and those sorts of things. See here, most current version, last update date, 1st of the 1st, 2020, which one this was taken. And so you have those there. Then you've got the links, the direct links straight back through. Why is that important? Well, it's important if you are wanting to make sure that you're protecting the agency, providing consistency, helping develop and grow your people, part of your retention strategy. It's all of those things. Just for a property manager, these are the acts that they need. There's some others as well, but these are all secondary acts. So of course there's the Tenancies Act, the Estate Agents Act, but they need to be across all of these as well. And sometimes they will never have read them. And so what we do is we go through and we read them and then bring out summary points that they need to know. Last one, internal audit, risk management. Category 13, risk management, potential breaches, rent roll churn, rent roll value, and sales opportunities. Are the OO's Office and Effective Control directors and business owners actively involved in overseeing the rent roll, overseeing the rollout, training and implementations of updated procedures, policies, and operation and minimum standards? Ultimately, the Office and Effective Control is responsible to ensure the agency has good agency practices and the staff are working within those practices. So is the director, the Office and Effective Control, are they actively engaged in making sure that the changes that are happening in the next couple of weeks, that they're across those? Sometimes the answer is going to be no. Has there been a complete document audit carried out on all staff files to ensure that each person has an authority to act, is eligible, has a valid police check, and is linked to the business licensing authority? You would not be surprised the number of times that I jump onto a license and I've got an authority that's been completed by a property manager, but then when I go to the BLA, that property manager's never been added to the license. And as a result of that, that authority is invalid. And so we've got a real issue. So we need to make sure that whoever's managing that. So when was the last time there was an audit? Never, never a bad time to be doing audits around your staffing. Are you satisfied that the agency company name, trading name, ABN, ACN are being used correctly on the agency documents in accordance with the license, registered with the BLA, ASIC, and ATO? This isn't, I've put this as the last question simply because, oh, it's actually one of the last questions, or it is the last question. It is the last question. Simply because it is the number one thing that I see in all offices when I get their Inspection Express documents, I get their Vic forms, when I get whatever it may be, is that they have not gone back and they've cross-checked the name. And so often I will see an incorrect trading name, an incorrect company name, missing company name on the authorities. And then we've got 100, 200, 300, 400. That's not the property manager's responsibility. It's the principal and whoever's in charge looking after office managers, compliance managers to make sure that that's all correct. It's one of those very first things that I do when I'm saying to work with an office. How'd you go with that category 13? All right, how did you rate yourself out of 218 points? So what you'll do is you'll then go and count up all of your not applicables, put those in to get a percentage, count up all of your no's, create a percentage, and count up all of your yeses. And so let's just work on, I'm going to work this now. Let's just say we had a 45 yeses, 45 here. I'm going to do 45 divided by 218 times 100 equals 20.6% and 64%. And that's roughly what you're looking for here. And what I find is that most officers, when they first start doing this, they'll sit somewhere between that 20 to 30, maybe 35%, if they've been honest with regards to the questions. Now, of course, someone's going to come in and say, yes, 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 get themselves up to 60%. They're only kidding themselves. But most people, when they first start off with an audit like this, are sitting around that sort of 20 to 30. And then what we do is we would then benchmark this for next year. So set aside maybe 1st of March and do the same thing again. Then set aside 1st of June, maybe 1st of September, and then again November, December of 2026, and then use the same level of questions to see how you're tracking. That's what's going to give you. But if you've got more than 30%, great. Two things. You're either running a very, very good business, or two, go back and just check and make sure that you're answering those questions well. So then what I would suggest you do is you go and take all of your no's or your missings and all your points, create your strategy, your list of tasks. And what I find is there's people that are procrastinators and there's action takers. And so there's two types of people that whenever I'm training. And there's the person over here, the procrastinator. That's the one that's going to sit there and say, I will get to that. I'll get around to it. I'll start this next year. I'm not ready right now. Now's really busy. And then they go off and next year is going to be exactly the same. Yeah, and if you know that, all you need to do is look back and say, what was it like 3 months ago? Were you busy? And you're 3 months later, you're always going to be busy. And so then, of course, you've got those action takers. They're the person, that's the person that's filled in the checklist, has now got heaps of notes, probably looks, it's got highlighted all the way through, and is now excited about being able to, one, have an understanding of where they're up to, but two, the tasks ahead. I opened up this session earlier with there's constant change, there's always going to be change. That's not going to stop. So you might as well actually then start to get yourself on board with the change and be at the front, be a forerunner. Okay. The next one. Here's the next. Here are a couple of some summary points. You can take those. Implement good systems, processes, and workflows. Inform and educate your owners. Implement company policies. Run an internal audit across your entire portfolio. Ensure you've got written and accurate documents and minimum standards declarations on file. Run your own checklist. If you want the standards, if you want the checklist, I can, create that in your brand if you wanted it to. As an add value service, start conducting minimum standards walkthroughs. Get a third party. Conduct internal audits on your internet advertising. This is the way you should be challenging the next couple of months. The agencies that take things, the agencies that take this in their stride and then will grow and will use this. There'll be, I think there was 15 or 16 agencies that registered for today. There was different people that different number of people that will actually watch the video because there's the staff will come as well. But 15 or so agencies. Three or four might do this. The rest will go, yeah, it's another thing to do and not do anything. They'll be the procrastinator. And so the three or four, I'm really keen. I'm happy to work with you if you wanted to. Happy to answer any of your questions. But the other agencies, they'll wrap up 2025, start 2026, not too dissimilar to the way they did it last year. There's my contact details. Google review. Hopefully you've learnt something. If you have, I would love to be able to get another Google review. Here I am here. I'm chasing 200 Google reviews. That was the award from the REIV just recently, about 3 weeks ago, and that was the Operational Leadership Award. And that was because I was working across 22 different offices late last year, and that was last year's award, and making a difference to so many different offices with the same things that I'm talking to you about today, implementing those into businesses. And then as a result, the REIV, so it's the state award, and then it becomes part of the national awards as well. Feel free to jump onto my website. There's lots of information that is available to you. I'll wrap it up now. I actually got questions here at the end, but we already went into the questions. Thank you very much for your encouragement, or not encouragement, thank you very much for your interest in coming through to the webinar today. I hope that this checklist has helped. I know that if you went through, and I do this with businesses now, and then what we do, we identify where we're up to, we identify what we need to put in place, and then we just go in and roll up our sleeves and start getting the work done. And the businesses that we do this for, I know that we make a difference. And so I would like to think that in a couple of months' time, you will, at least 3 months' time, you'll have started to implement some of those things. Thank you. Have a great day. Chat soon.